welcome to First Mover, your first global look at today's action in the Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital asset space. I'm your host, Christine Lee, and joining me are my co-hosts, CoinDesk Managing Editor of Global Capital Markets, Lawrence Lewitinn, and Managing Director of International Content, Emily Parker. Good morning, you two. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Happy Friday, Junior. All right, let's get started. Checking in on Bitcoin right now, the XBX Bitcoin price trading at 58,100. It's up about 5% over the past 24 hours. And the ETX Ether price right now trading at 1796. It's up as well about 1.5% over the past 24 hours, according to TradeBlock data, the most reliable reference price for institutions since 2014, with billions in assets under management benchmarked against it. So, Lawrence, yes. Are the markets getting that bump from the stimulus checks? Is it the Fed comments from yesterday? What is it?
A lot of it's from the comments from yesterday. The party is just going to keep going. We saw the 10-year yield is now over 1.7%. That indicates that the market expects some more inflation to come, and the Fed probably won't stop it anytime soon. So a lot of buying, and some more buying. It's pretty much it. Yeah. That's the best way to describe it.
Money. All right. Emily, the SEC has also published VanEck's Bitcoin ETF application. What happens now? Are we closer to a Bitcoin ETF in the United States?
That is the trillion-dollar question. So as we all know, there have been many such applications for an ETF in the United States. The SEC has flatly rejected all of them. So this potentially could be the first such product, but who knows? In the past, reasons for rejecting ETF proposals have ranged from concerns over market manipulation to other reasons. The reason why there could be more hope this time around is because the SEC is going to have a new chair who may have a different attitude towards these products from the previous administration. So I think everybody is going to be very curious to see what happens next.
Excellent. Well, our first guest of the show is perfect for this story coming up. All right. So the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission has stymied attempts by investment companies to invest in Bitcoin and has done nothing to resolve the legal and practical ambiguity around exchange-traded products, according to remarks from SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce at the British Blockchain Association this week, criticizing the agency she serves. Moreover, Peirce criticized the SEC's failure to provide clarity on qualified custodians for crypto and when digital assets are securities. Joining us now to discuss is none other than SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce herself. Welcome, Commissioner.
It's a delight to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a delight to have you. All right. So the SEC published VanEck's Bitcoin ETF application. The clock is ticking, and the agency now has 45 days to approve or deny the application or extend the review period. What are the chances of approval this time around, Commissioner?
Well, I can't speak to any particular application, and of course I should say that my views are my own views and not necessarily those of the commissioner or my fellow commissioners. And I think that is relevant here. I have looked at past ETP applications a bit differently than my colleagues and have thought that we should move forward. Every application is considered on its own facts and circumstances. But I do think that some of the reasons that we've denied ETP applications for Bitcoin-related ETPs in the past have differed from the way that we've approached similar products based, for example, on precious metals.
Well, with new leadership coming in, is there a chance of a mentality toward innovation changing and perhaps warming up to something like an ETP or F product?
Yeah, I agree with Emily that does make a difference. The likely incoming chairman, he's awaiting confirmation now in the Senate, is Gary Gensler, who's someone who knows this space very well. He's been teaching at MIT, teaching courses on blockchain and crypto, so he's very familiar with the issues, and I think that'll give him a fresh perspective and help the agency to take a fresh look.
Commissioner Peirce, welcome back. You've expressed some concern about this idea of first mover advantage. Well, it's great for our show, of course. The first mover to apply for an ETF would potentially get a lot more assets. Why not just batch them all together? You have several applications for a Bitcoin ETF right now. Why not batch them all together and then approve them? If they're going to be approved, approve them all together and go full Oprah. You know, you get an ETF, you get an ETF, you get an ETF.
Well, I think that we have sort of changed this whole notion of first mover because people come in and then they wait a long time. So it's almost difficult to know now who the first mover was. So it's almost like it's the race on to be the first approved. And I think you make a good point that it might make sense to do things in a batch. But a lot of this just depends on how things come in. And again, I don't know whether my colleagues are going to change their view. So we'll see what happens. And everyone has to be considered on its own facts. Each one of these applications has been slightly different from the others. And so we'll have to take that into account too. But I hear what you're saying.
So when we last spoke, I also asked you about companies that are loading up their balance sheet with Bitcoin and potentially acting as a form of an ETF. Any further discussions at the SEC about that? And is there any concern that somebody might, let's say, buy an old zombie company that's still publicly traded, load it up with Bitcoin and operate it like an ETF? Where are the signals to the SEC that this might be a problem and that this is acting like it shouldn't?
Well, I mean, I'm certainly following the trend. I think that people have to realize that if you take an operating company and you put some of your balance sheet in Bitcoin, that's one thing. If you're running the whole entity as just that, that's a quite different thing, and it might implicate some securities laws. So you better be careful before you adopt that kind of a strategy.
There's no specific point though where you say, is there like a percentage of the balance sheet where you say this is more? I mean, Bitcoin than ETF?
Yeah, sorry. There's specific rules around when you flip over into becoming sort of an inadvertent investment company. It's a little more complicated with Bitcoin as the underlier, But again, I mean, so far what I've seen is not operating companies completely changing over to being just about holding Bitcoin. If that happened, I really do think people need to consider the securities law ramifications of that.
Welcome back, Commissioner Peirce. I'm going to change the topic for a moment and go to what is now the current Wild West of the crypto world, which is NFTs. And some people are comparing NFTs to the ICO boom of a few years ago. And so my question for you is, do you expect NFTs to eventually get on the SEC's radar in terms of deciding whether or not they are securities? And I'd just be interested to hear what you think of this whole phenomenon in general.
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting to see, certainly a surprising phenomenon in terms of the dollars involved and the enthusiasm involved. We're always looking at things to see whether or not they might be securities. I think in the case of NFTs, they might also fall into some other category. But we look at each one on its facts and circumstances again and see. I mean, because of the fact that they are non-fungible, it maybe makes them look less like securities. But again, you have to assess every one on its own facts and circumstances. So I'm certainly not making any kind of blanket statements.
And just more generally, what do you think of the NFT boom that's going on? Do you think it's becoming a bubble? Do you think it's going to radically democratize the art world? I'm just curious what your perception is, because it's quite an interesting phenomenon.
It is an interesting phenomenon, and I think to me, I don't know whether it's a bubble now or what's going to happen to it, but I think the kernel of what's there, which is trying to figure out a way to compensate artists for their work, is a really fascinating one. And I think that that's something that it's a problem a lot of people have been trying to solve. And so this may be one way of solving it. Maybe this is the initial attempt at solving it, and there's going to have to be refinement. But I think it's an interesting idea for that reason. That's one of the things that people have looked at blockchain as a potential solution.
Commissioner, you also, in your remarks earlier this week, criticized the SEC for a lack of clarity on qualified custodians for crypto and when digital assets should be or not securities. I'm wondering if you see any priorities in outlining and having more clarity on these issues.
Well, I think that the SEC has been trying to get input. And, you know, as I also noted in that speech, people have been a little bit slow to provide us input. So the more input we get, the more likely it is that we're going to be able to address this issue. But I am hopeful, too. Again, I'm looking at the incoming chair, and this is an area that I plan to talk to him about, too, and to say, look, affording people clarity is just allowing people to enter into the space and do so with confidence that they're complying with the rules. And so that's the least we owe to people, is just to give them a way to legally do this and to give them comfort about it. So I'm going to continue pushing for it.
Commissioner Peirce, there's a bill right now working its way on Capitol Hill that would help clarify the regulations. Has the SEC, or have you in particular, had any input with its design or with any aspect of it?
Yeah, so there are a couple bills that are out there. And the Token Taxonomy Act, I believe, was reintroduced, and then there's another bill as well that would try to encourage it would direct the SEC and the CFTC to put together a committee which could then consider some of these issues. You know, I've talked in the past to folks on the Hill who are behind those bills about this space, and you know, they're pushing forward to give us some kind of a statutory nudge to move forward, and I appreciate their interest in this area. And I think that some of these things we could do on our own. Certainly we in the CFTC could sit down and put together a task force, which I think is always useful, because we're both regulators in this space, and it's sometimes difficult to see where the lines should be drawn. So even if those bills don't move forward, there's some things that we can think about and be doing on our own.
Commissioner Peirce, just to go back to the ETFs, why do you think Canada was able to approve several Bitcoin ETFs, but the U.S. has not been able to?
Well, to be fair, the standards in Canada and the standards in the U.S., I don't know whether they're the same, and so that's one question where you have to start. But you know, second, as I've said, I think we in the United States could have approved an exchange traded product long ago using the rules that we've applied to other kinds of products. And so it's an unfortunate aspect of our regulatory approach to this area so far, which is that we've taken this view that because it's crypto, it gets treated differently. And you know, to some extent, that's rational. You have to think about this new asset class, and you have to wade in carefully. And this is all motivated by the securities regulators' native instinct, which is to be very protective and very cautious and very careful. But you know, I hope that we'll learn from what the Canadians have done. We get a chance to watch how it's working up there, and maybe that'll motivate us to then move forward. So I think it's important that you point that out, because that is yet another factor that should nudge us forward.
Just one final quick question. Are there any specific areas where you foresee the new incoming chair, Gary Gensler, as differing from the former leadership? Any kind of specific areas where his attitude or approach is likely to be markedly different?
Well, as an initial matter, it's important to remember that there's going to be a lot on his agenda. He's going to be getting there, kind of getting his arms around the issues at the agency. We've had a very exciting beginning of the year with all of the trading around GameStop and the other meme stocks. And so part of what we're doing now is sorting through those issues. But I think what he brings to the job in terms of crypto is the base understanding. And so no one has to start trying to explain to him the potential for the technology or how it works, because he already knows that. And so for him, I think he can dive right in and start wrestling with the legal issues and the policy issues that come up, and I think that'll be a much easier place to start for people who are talking to them from the outside, and for me as well. And so I'm optimistic that we're going to make some progress.
Commissioner Peirce, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Very insightful. Always a pleasure having you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you all.
All right. That was SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce. Coming up, BTC markets analysis with crypto lending firm Nexo. Welcome back. Checking in on Bitcoin. The XBX Bitcoin price trading at $57,895. It's up almost 5% over the past 24 hours. And the ETX Ether price right now trading at $17.93, also up about 1.4%. And joining us now to discuss the crypto markets from London is Antoni Trenchev, managing partner at crypto lending firm Nexo. Welcome, Antoni.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you. All right. So, Antoni, I was looking up your tweets, and you tweeted, bans are only as effective as countries are united. The India ban is a non-event. Only a coordinated G20 effort can cause damage to BTC, but the signs are to the contrary. 100,000 is inevitable, although it won't be a smooth ride as 2020 would suggest. What do you mean by that, Antoni? What is the journey to 100,000 BTC?
Well, you got to consider that, financial markets, anything that is related to to money, pardon me, is, psychology based. So when everyone sees a particular trade and gets into on the bandwagon, it usually turns out slightly different than everyone would expect it. So, when I made a prediction last January, when we were around $7,000 per Bitcoin, that we're going to 50K, very few people were, tuning into my chorus, and now everyone is making this gigantic predictions: 100K, 200, 400, a million, and it's obviously that when a trade gets too crowded, it usually it turns out to be quite different. And having said that, on the fundamental side of things, everything is lined up to Bitcoin's benefit. Last night's announcement by the Fed that there's no slowing down of the printing machines makes the long-term prospects of Bitcoin even brighter. But that's what I mean. The ride won't be a smooth one because we are in a very late stage of this wave right now.
Antoni, speaking of movies, we're seeing an explosion of stimulus of Jerry Bruckheimer proportions. How are you seeing that translate into crypto? Are you seeing $1,200 accounts open up on Nexo?
Some, although right now, like the first initial steps that people in the US make with crypto are predominantly on Coinbase. So there's very interesting to watch their account opening with 12 or $400,000 and what's unfolding there. But yeah, we do see the retail finally coming in a more aggressive way on the Nexo platform, and that's why I say that we should be watching the market action around $75,000, because this will give us a somewhat clear indication of what the leverage in the system is, how many people are actually buying on credit, and this is always indicative of market tops, or at least temporarily market tops, and that's what we'll be watching lately.
Any concern that there might be even too much leverage in the market?
Well, the concern with leverage is always on the too much rather than the too little side of things. So, obviously, this is where the dangers come in. This is what brought in the Great Recession in 2008. This is what brought the 20K top in 2017, 2018 bull run. It was people maxing out their credit cards, getting on credit to buy even more crypto. And we're not quite there yet. But you have to be careful at this levels, with Bitcoin above $1 trillion as a total market cap. It is uncharted territory, and we have to be cautious here.
So if your prediction that Bitcoin is going to go to 100,000, what is the outlook for Ether? Do you have any thoughts on where Ether is headed?
I don't have a particular number for ETH. There are certainly some challenges related to market congestion, the exorbitant fees that people have been forced and businesses have been forced to pay. We, for a very long time, wanted to support the community by covering those fees, but it's just getting, ludicrous. And obviously there are challenges. I'm very, very bullish on ETH, like the whole ecosystem with stable coins, with the DeFi space is based on Ethereum, which makes me very, very bullish. Apart from Bitcoin and obviously the Nexo token, the other major asset in my personal portfolio is ETH. So I am quite bullish. I don't have a particular price target because it's a very different asset from what Bitcoin is. When I came up with my prediction of $50,000, which luckily turned around to be correct, I made it based on the assumption that Bitcoin will initially capture 10% of the total market cap of gold, and that gave you a price of around $50,000. I don't have anything like that for ETH, but I am bullish. I'm quite bullish. And if you take a look at the options market, it's skewed to the bullish side as well.
Antoni, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Appreciate your insights in the markets.
Thank you. Anytime.
All right, that was Nexo managing partner Antoni Trenchev. Coming up, how crypto mining could cut down your tax bill, and checking in with CoinDesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day. Welcome back. Time to check in with CoinDesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day, who is also the editor of CoinDesk's The State of Crypto newsletter. Good morning, Nick. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
So, Nick, I'm hearing that Ripple has a couple of filings. Tell us more about the trials and tribulations of Ripple.
Yeah, so this is the SEC case against Ripple that kicked off in December. It's still ongoing. Right now, there seem to be a couple procedural moves happening, but the SEC has requested access to, or they've tried subpoenaing Ripple executives, I think, bank accounts. So that's Brad Garlinghouse, the CEO, and Chris Larsen, the executive chairman. Both these executives have asked the court to deny these subpoenas. They say that, it's irrelevant to the specific charges. But the SEC is alleging that, these two might be hiding some of their XRP holdings or moving around their tokens. And they want to know more about this. So we're still waiting on a judge to weigh in on this and, make a ruling about whether or not the SEC can continue these.
Nick, any thoughts on the VanEck ETF proposal? Is this something that, I don't know, you paying attention to it? What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, so it's a fairly procedural thing that the SEC published a 19B4 form that VanEck and CBOE-BZX markets filed. But what it does is start off the clock, basically. It means that within the next 240 days, we will absolutely get a decision on this ETF application. So right now, we're just waiting on this proposal to be published in the Federal Register, which is kind of like the nation's logbook, I guess, is the best way to describe it. But once that happens, it kicks off the first 45-day clock, meaning the public has about 21 days or 3 weeks to weigh in. And then, 20 something days after that, 24 days after that, the SEC will respond with either an approval, a rejection, or most likely they'll kick the can down the road a little bit. They'll say, hey, we need more time. We want to extend this comment period a little bit. And that's what we've seen in every other ETF application in 2017, 2018, and I think 2019 even.
How soon from the time that VanEck submitted their application to the second one after that from somebody else? Are we going to start to see all these start popping up on the SEC website for people to comment on, or is it going to be a while before the next one comes up?
So a couple of companies have filed or announced their intentions to file. Valkyrie, we had one of their folks on yesterday. They filed. Wisdom Tree filed, I think, last week even, so very recently. But what these forms are just kind of the initial forms. They still need the partner exchange like CBOE or NYSE ARCA to file the 19B4, and I haven't seen any more of those yet. So once those are filed, that's when we can start getting a better sense of the timing around this. Basically, once those forms get filed within a couple of weeks, the SEC will have to say, like, hey, yeah, we're looking at this, we're considering it, we're making a decision.
All right, Nick, thank you so much for your update this morning.
Thank you.
All right, that was CoinDesk Managing Editor of Global Policy and Regulation, Nick Day. Don't forget to sign up for the State of Crypto newsletter on CoinDesk.com. And tax season is upon us. And our next guest explains how Bitcoin investors can use Bitcoin mining to cut down your tax bill. Joining us now from Philadelphia is vBit CEO Don Vo. Welcome, Don.
Thank you for having me. How are you guys?
Great to have you. It's nice and gloomy as ever in New York. Anyway, explain to us how this works. How does this Bitcoin mining cut down on your tax bill?
Well, Bitcoin mining, just like any other, venture that you're getting involved into for the purpose of making money or making a profit, is considered a business. So people should view Bitcoin mining like just running another type of business. And you're in the business of running computer servers to process financial transactions for the Bitcoin network. And when you're running a business, all of your expenses, all of your CapEx layout, you can utilize it as a write-off. So in this case, in Bitcoin mining, when you're purchasing all of this computer equipment, when you're setting up all of the infrastructure, there is going to be upfront cost, which you will recover over time as you're mining Bitcoin and you're receiving a little bit more Bitcoin every day. But when you lay out the CapEx and you have this upfront cost, you at the end of the year when you're filing your taxes, you can use it as a tax write-off. And with with the current way that the IRS is allowing you to write off the depreciation. They're allowing you to accelerate depreciation to write off the whole cost of all of the machinery, the computers that you're putting into the business, which means that you immediately get a pretty big write off of your income or other incomes that are coming from other sources.
Earlier this week, we had Kevin O'Leary on the show, and he was talking about the importance of quote unquote virgin coin. I don't know if you're familiar with his comments, but basically what he was saying is that people and institutions are going to become increasingly concerned about where Bitcoin mining is happening, particularly related to geopolitical concerns about China. Do you think that's true? Do you think people are going to start being more concerned about where this Bitcoin is coming from and where the origin of Bitcoin?
I definitely think so, because a big part of Bitcoin's decentralization, that's the big draw to Bitcoin for a lot of people, right? Bitcoin is not like your regular fiat currency that is controlled by any specific government, which means that the governance of Bitcoin being decentralized, it's dependent on the Bitcoin miners. And in order for you to make, to post any transactions to the ledger of the Bitcoin ledger, you need at least 51%, or make any changes to the Bitcoin network, you need at least 51% consensus throughout, the whole mining network. And and if we are to keep Bitcoin decentralized, we need Bitcoin mining, the hash rate, to also be decentralized, to be coming from, like multiple countries, and which in the past, most of the hash rate is actually coming from China, but we're seeing that diversify a lot right now, and a lot of firms are starting to join the Bitcoin mining network in North America, and bringing more of the hash rate to North America right now, which I think is an added benefit to Bitcoin as a whole, in order to keep it decentralized.
Don, when you talk about the tax benefit of mining at home, you're not including trading activity against it, correct? Trading activity, if you're buying and selling Bitcoin and you also run a miner, they're separate concepts. That's correct, right?
Yes, that is a separate concept. And Bitcoin mining is like running your own business, whereas, trading or just buying and holding, it's more of a, just a capital investment that you're going to, if you hold more than 1 year, then you're going to be paying, capital gains tax instead. But running Bitcoin mining, one of the biggest benefits to trading and just buying Bitcoin is that tax write-off at the at the initial onset of opening your mining business. Whereas if you're just buying Bitcoin, you're not getting that initial write-off.
And you can't write off the trading activity against the mining activity.
No, so it's going to be two separate things, because when you're mining, then you're basically getting everything that you mine on a daily basis. That's your cost basis for the initial Bitcoins that you're getting, and then after that's your cost basis. And then when you decide to sell, whatever profit you made in between, that's going to be viewed as capital gains, right. And it's
Don,
totally separate from trading activity. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Don. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
All right, that was vBit CEO Don Vo. Time now to check in with Crypto Twitter with our tweet of the day. The pseudonymous buyer of People's 70 million NFT artwork at Christie's is pseudonymous no more. Metaverse.eth tweeting, "We could have remained pseudonymous, but we decided to drop a few hints at Christie's and a few more at Clubhouse. Now here's the story of how crypto gave two Indians the chance to take part in the largest NFT sale in history." The article is also out on CoinDesk.com. We know that Vignesh Sundaresh, and I'm going to butcher that name, sorry, from Singapore is Metakoven, who we had on earlier this week. So good read, follow up on that. That's it for First Mover. Coming up tomorrow is special guest Skybridge Capital founder and former White House Communications Director Antoni Scaramucci, the Mooch himself. Thank you, Emily Parker, our CoinDesk Managing Director of International Content, and Lawrence Lewitinn, Managing Editor of Global Capital Markets. I'm your host, Christine Lee. I'll be back live at 3 p.m. with All About Bitcoin. Coming up at noon is The Hash. You're watching CoinDesk TV.